Nick Lawlor, you're very welcome to the Lead Well podcast.
You're very good for having me. Thank you, Mark.
So, Nick, could you maybe start us off by telling us a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur and a little bit about employee financial wellness?
Sure. Well, where do I start? I mean, well, I grew up in the fields of Kildare, and I think I told my mother I wanted to be the president of the world once. But little did I realise that there was no such thing as the president of the world. So we look. I mean, from a background perspective, grew up in a family where there was, a classic mother, father, and two boys. But, my dad died young, so it kind of meant quite quickly and quite early in life, kind of went from 1.5 incomes down to a half, and we kind of. Don't get me wrong. There was a wonderfully happy upbringing, but from a very early age, we kind of went from kind of fairly comfortable to a little bit tight. And it's only now that you're kind of looking back on that time, you think, well, actually, there was almost like a yearning for more money, more success, I guess, or more of those things that money would enable you to have. And really, that's only looking back now, you think, actually, well, there was a great appreciation then for what hard work meant, in terms of how hard work could actually then connect to perhaps more opportunity in terms of what you can do in life. And so yeah, I mean, went to college, didn't do great, went off to America, had a bit of fun over there, and then came back and realized, well, actually, for me to progress my career, I'm going to need to study. That education piece was something that I didn't quite cop onto early enough, certainly through college. While I did get through college, I didn't do particularly well. And it was only then kind of through my 20s where I thought, God, all the people who actually, did study and did well and, and got the qualifications and kept going, I mean, their careers are soaring where mine is stagnating a bit. So quite quickly then I decided, well, there's a missing ingredient here. I need to go and learn more. So yeah, at that point went off and became, a qualified advisor and many other qualifications in the last couple of decades too, from specialist investment advisor to health promotion person to certified financial planner and up to master's level and beyond. So yeah, I kind of came to education quite late, and I suppose there's a little bit of a theme in there, and that education did become the enabler for me in terms of being able to try and say, well, actually, why can't we take that knowledge and be able to try and mass distribute that knowledge?
And can I ask you, Nick, are you happy that I suppose when you talk about education later in life, are you happy that you did come to it later in life versus maybe doing and following a career path at a younger age that you weren't really invested in, whereas you did a bit of travel, obviously you saw a little bit of the world, you gave yourself time to really understand what you wanted to do, which enabled you then, as you say, go back into education, but step into a career that, as we see now, has been extremely prosperous over the last number of years?
Yeah, I mean, would I tell my 18-year-old self to run the next few years as they transpired for me? Probably not. I mean, there wasn't that much effort to be able to just work a little bit harder through college. I mean, ultimately, adding education is a really positive thing. I mean, we've got kids all over the country, studying today, or doing exams today. And of course you would suggest that they, put their best foot forward, try their best. But as it transpired, I mean, it is not the be all and end all if you miss it early in your career. There is plenty of opportunity to get back. And to your point, I mean, certainly I was like every other college student and early 20s boy, where I wanted to just travel, see the world, hang out, have fun, meet new people. So certainly I kind of did a lot of that in those early years, probably to the detriment of my knowledge base, but there's plenty of time. I mean, and certainly there's no end of opportunity in terms of learning. So, I just came to it a little bit later, and if I had my time back, would I do it again? Maybe a little bit differently, but certainly I ended up in the right place, I think.
There are a lot of skills also, though, to be, I suppose, gained from doing that aspect of traveling. And, you think about, I suppose, how important networking is as a business owner, founder, as you're growing your business, doing a little bit of that travel, having to stand on your own 2 feet. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that stands to you then when, years to come, you are running your own business.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I look back to my studies, I mean, I was in DIT, and I became, I became president of the Students' Union there actually for a year, and that probably distracted me a little bit from my studies because I was having a good time. But I seem to have the ability to kind of, almost pull the wool over some people's eyes that I kind of knew what I was talking about. When really, it was a little bit more a kind of front of house type of person, but at that time. I ended up on the governing body with DIT and kind of got great exposure at that point to kind of how the real world works. I mean, how decisions are made, how are the functions of an organization, and if you're at the top level, i.e., in the governing body or the various other bodies within, a third level institution like DIT, it probably gave me a great appreciation then of the mechanics of how organizations work. And to your point, yeah, that probably then stood to me in terms of when I added the knowledge base to underpin that, then it probably was the piece of the jigsaw I needed.
Brilliant. And tell us a little bit about what you do at Employee Financial Wellness.
Yes, so Employee Financial Wellness is an organization where we believe strongly that financial education is missing largely in our society, globally. In fact, I mean, we can talk about global financial literacy rates and where financial well-being sits within financial literacy. Well, Employee Financial Wellness, what we do is we try and improve the financial literacy levels of our client organizations' employees. So, we want to be able to say to organizations, well, actually, we want employees to live better lives with the income and savings that they generate by dint of their employment. So we know that all of us, we create our financial independence through our employments, most typically, and unless we're lucky enough to inherit or be gifted lots and lots of money, the vast majority of us will create our financial independence and connect to our financial aspirations, goals. The lives that we aspire to have is enabled by our ability to create financial independence. So, when we think about that, we would feel that there's a mass missed opportunity because there's a mass lack of understanding about the principles of money, and literacy levels. Let's talk about literacy. Like globally, the average literacy levels. And what I mean by literacy levels is the ability for people to make a sensible decision that they could then, realize on some of their life goals, that they're informed enough, that they're educated enough to make a good decision. There's only 33% of the globe that hit that minimum threshold, right? So that means that there's 2/3 of the world not empowered enough to be able to make good decisions with the income that they generate. In Ireland, we're better. We're at about 58%, but there's still a big gap there. So what we do at Employee Financial Wellness is we try and bridge that gap, and we try and teach employees in their workplace the principles of money, because obviously there's no formal education around money, and our intervention type is to understand that people do worry about this stuff. They are concerned that they're missing out on a better life because they feel a frustration because lots of things can sometimes go wrong with money, and our role is to be a little bit different from everyone else. I think it's to try and teach the principles of money to the masses.
Excellent. And obviously we're going to touch on very exciting news, obviously, last year for yourselves and Employee Financial Wellness. Obviously, there was an acquisition that took place, so we might dive into that in a little bit more detail. But bring me back to when you set up your first company. So you obviously in 2011 set up your first company. Talk to us a little bit about, why did you decide? Because before that, you were working in Corn Market.
Correct.
So you had I would imagine quite a comfortable job, secure, etc. And then all of a sudden you decided, no, you know what? I want to step out of this and I want to set up my own business. So where did that graw come from?
Yeah, well, I mean, I first became a financial advisor in 2006, so we're getting close on 20 years. And I kind of thought, well, I need to, take some of the knowledge, did the exams, and worked my way through to kind of a senior role in Corn Market, as you say. And I got to the point where I just felt, I think my knowledge now would allow me to then try and help people more broadly, and to see beyond, say, public sector that Corn Market would specialize in. I was getting married that year, and I thought, yeah, look, why not? What's the worst that can happen? I mean, if you try something for 6 months or a year or 2 years and it doesn't work, well, you can always become an employee of an organization again. You have the skill sets, you have the qualifications, you have the experience. So I would have considered the risk of going out on my own quite small. Because it was very much a nothing ventured, nothing gained kind of approach. And really, what was the obstacles here? Well, you needed to get regulated. It was a regulated industry. You don't just give financial advice without being regulated. So that took a little bit of time. And then really, if we think about the time we were in, if you can succeed while the country is on its knees financially with, obviously the 08, 09 financial global crisis, that really in 2011, 2012, there was, this was the low point in terms of, it was really only the start of the recovery for Ireland. And certainly at that point, I thought, well, hey, people are struggling with money. And I had gone from dealing with people who did have money, 06, 07, 08. And I thought, look, there is a need for, individuals to get help. And I felt I had the skill set to do that. So as a result, I thought, hey, look, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Set up my own biz, get it regulated, get out and network, get out and meet people. And, there was a point when I was, struggling to get new clients. I mean, I was putting flyers in the front doors I was flyer dropping, which is weird. Naturally, when you look at a flyer through the door, it could be for window cleaning or grass cutting. I mean, talk to me about your financial affairs. People are like, what? I'm not going to talk to a guy who does flyers. But ultimately, that was what needed to be done at that time to try and get some customers. But ultimately, networking and building up a little bit of base and just being good at what you do and being honest, allowed that business to go quite well for the couple of years. And we were, quite comfortable with it. It was going in the right direction. So the next piece then, I was tempted to kind of move back into the city and try and look at a bigger operation.
And tell us when, and I'd love to bring you back for a second because you talked about obviously dropping the flyers in and, trying to do that type of work at the start just to kind of build up, I suppose, the business. What else did you do at that time, right in those early years when you're thinking, right, you're kind of saying to yourself, what can I do to build up a bit of a reputation, get some clients on board? Were there any other things that you did around that time that you look back now and you go, wow, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Well, the flyers was probably a low point, being honest. When you're walking around, it probably didn't fit where you wanted to get to. I mean, the most successful part was absolutely networking. I joined a networking group, and really when you think about the principles of what people in business want and where that engagement with customers comes from, ultimately I would have believed in the know, like, and trust philosophy. That if you could build, knowledge, if people get to know you, if they then trust you, and if they ultimately like you, it means that there's a far greater chance that they will work with you. So to do that, then obviously you need to build reputation, and build reputation means that you need to demonstrate your knowledge. You need to have, a demonstrable ethical approach to how you deal with people, and ultimately add value to people's lives. So over the following years, from the ground up, I tried to build on those principles of know, like, and trust, and demonstrate those knowledges, and ultimately then be able to try and build enduring relationships. Because I also feel that financial services, I think financial services in Ireland and possibly in other jurisdictions, but certainly in Ireland, it can be quite disconnected. It can be very salesy. It can be like, buy this and I'll get paid and I'll never see you again. And we kind of wanted to flip that on its head. I wanted to have small group of clients who would call me every time there was a financial decision to be made, and we would toy it out and we would argue and say, well, actually, what about this? And to have a much more consultative approach, and that I think stood the test of time, because then you build, know, like, and trust with those people, and as a result, that's how the business kind of went from strength to strength in the early days.
Yeah, and I like that as a model because I'm sure it's very easy for people to kind of translate that to any industry, know, like, and trust. And it's nearly, when you talked about initially the flyers being dropped, that's like the know stage, nearly getting people to know who you are.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, you build on those relationships over time until those relationships get to the point where you've got more customers coming in who trust you, who are referring probably more customers onto you then as a result. So no, I like that as a model for listeners as well.
Yeah.
When you think about, Nick, your experience as a financial advisor around that time. So you said obviously kind of 08, 09, obviously financial crash, and then obviously middle of that period. What was your experience like in terms of dealing with clients going through that?
Yeah, so we have to think. Like, geez, it wasn't long ago,
Yeah.
We have to think like Celtic Tiger Ireland, 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, 06. I mean, and all of a sudden when we got to 09, this was the end of the world stuff financially. And then obviously Ireland went through Troika and kind of coming out the other side. And so certainly, in my first years as a financial advisor, I was typically dealing with people who had money. Yeah. And quite quickly we're dealing with people who didn't have money. They were being beaten up almost. They were getting phone calls every day going, when are you going to pay that mortgage on that house that's now worth half of what the mortgage is? And that led to, that led to a huge amount of stress, actually. I mean, certainly kind of through 2011, 12, 13. I mean, traditionally and most commonly, I would have been dealing with people who really were, they had aspirations. They had life goals, dreams. They were going well. And then arguably through no fault of their own. I mean, some might say, well, they shouldn't have taken the extra mortgage or whatever, but these were global macro events that were happening that most of us could do absolutely nothing about. And to have your, life ambitions of, oh, well, I'm going to put the girls through college, or I'm going to, have the mortgage paid off in 10 years, or we're going to go on nice holidays, those events, because ultimately we don't love money. We love the events that money can connect to. And to have those things taken away, but actually put them in reverse, where actually you can't even pay for the most basic parts of your life, that became a real challenge for, Irish people. And, obviously in varying degrees. And quite quickly, it became apparent that, well, actually the people who I was seeing at that point were people who were really struggling. And, it became really obvious really quickly that, well, Mommy and Daddy are fighting. We just want them to talk again. And, he's blaming her and she's blaming him. And the whole way, some people were blasé and look, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's life. But other people would be insanely stressed because they missed a mobile phone bill, right? There was suicides. There was worse. It wasn't worse than suicides, but there was, all the way up the scale to mental health challenges and fallouts on the back of money, right? And it became pretty obvious then that what we need to be able to do is to say, well, like, if we could teach people the principles of money, if we could impart the knowledge that we have, would it help them to try and avoid future financial events? And like, we're a long way from there. I mean, and just to give you a sense of it, I mean, we would measure, and measure the attitudes and trends of the employees in the workplaces that we work with today. And still to this day, I mean, looking at some of the data only yesterday, I mean, there's 59% of employees, of all of the employees that we have dealt with, who would have the basic provision of an emergency fund in place, right, of 3 months, of 3 months net pay. And that means that there's still a huge number of people who don't have the basic level of financial insulation that in the event of a financial shock, that they would be able to deal with it without getting themselves into trouble. And here we are, 15 years later. So there's a long way to go on this. But certainly at that point, it became really, really obvious to me that, education, knowledge, financial literacy, which if taught in the right way and used in the right way, could avoid a lot of the future challenges that people might endure.
And can I ask you, Nick, you mentioned at the outset of our episode today, your own upbringing and obviously how you went from a household, obviously, where it wasn't an issue, and then all of a sudden, through tragic events, it was an issue. How much of that, I suppose, for you, when you think about that period that you're talking about, kind of middle of the financial crisis, how much of that fed into your want to really help people? And because you did something during that period then as well, which I'm sure you can talk to us a little bit about, where you teamed up with a barrister.
Yeah.
And you went on ultimately trying to really help people get out of serious financial difficulties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So then in kind of 2015, New Beginning had a friend of mine was working in New Beginning at the time, and New Beginning were an organization that were an advocacy group, basically a bunch of lawyers and barristers who got together to try and represent people against the banks, basically, because the Irish bankruptcy framework and criteria at that point was draconian. It was, if you were bankrupt, you were pillared, really. I mean, you're blacklisted for 12 years, and because of external events, we had vulture funds who'd taken over mass mortgage books, and their model was a very simple one, really. I mean, you can't fault a business for being a business. I mean, ultimately, their model was to buy it cheap and try and sweat the asset and try and make money. But the effect on people, the yous and the me's of the world, was that, well, their model was to try and put pressure on to try and get as much money out of those people as possible within the framework. And there was a strong belief, well, actually, that kind of more aggressive approach from those funds and some of the banks was too much, and there was a huge negative impact on the people who held those mortgages and were given those mortgages on the lending criteria that was applicable at the time. So, when a buddy of mine came to me and said, well, look, actually, what we're trying to do in New Beginning was kind of fix the past. But of course, if you try and help them fix the past, there's also a future. So my bit was to try and plan for the future. So fix the past and plan the future. And as a result, it set up a business where we wanted to try and help those people who were coming through the doors in their droves saying they needed help because of what had happened and because of the mortgage crisis that existed. So, quite quickly, and for the same reasons that I've articulated, there was a huge number of people coming through the door, and in almost every instance, they were in financial distress. So naturally, while New Beginning's role was to try and help them with debt and managing debt through PIAs and insolvency and bankruptcy, or simply just negotiating with the lenders, my role was to try and help them plan for the next bit, so that they could, actually see if we could use our knowledge to be able to see, well, let's see if we can build those financial insulations. Let's see if we can protect your retirement assets. Let's see if we can, try and help you to, work your way out of this and ultimately relieve those stresses. And from there, it just dawned on me. It was like, you know what? Financial education's what can really, really help here. It's not just, you need an insurance product or you need this. It's about, in the vast majority of cases, they just needed help. They just needed to know what to do. And we knew what to do. So as a result, spent a couple of years then trying to help those individuals. But that's ultimately where Employee Financial Wellness was born.
Incredible story as well from, your experience that you articulated from 2011, obviously, to taking that knowledge and experience, continuing to build on that, obviously being met with a financial crisis and then throwing yourself in to help people through that. And then obviously that light bulb moment out the other end is actually, maybe we're approaching this all wrong. Maybe there's a better way to actually do this and to actually help people. And as you say, that's where Employee Financial Wellness was born.
Yeah, correct. And it's almost obvious when you think back. I mean, you see the correlation between people who had financial difficulty, stress, mental health, fallout, all of those associated symptoms, guilt, sleeplessness, frustration, suicidal thoughts, suicide, all the entire gambit,
Yes.
the entire range. And it's like, what happened here? This was going well and now it's not going well. So we thought, look, where can we help people? Where is our market? Where is our, where is the best place for us to be able to try and support people? And we looked at workplace, and we thought, well, actually, because, each of us, there's obviously there's 2.9 million people working in Ireland today, creating income and their wealth and their financial independence by dint of their employment. We felt that was the place to run programs. And, let's, I suppose, think about this. If there's 1,000 people in a workplace, they're all unique individuals. They're all they would all deal with money in a different way, that they're all influenced through, what I would call the spheres of influence. They grow up being influenced by all of those around them, their parents, their friends, their community, their country, the geopolitical stuff, the school system, the education system. And then, we get to a place where they go to work. And to progress in work, they need to become more specialized in the thing they do. So then more disconnected from things like financial education. So invariably, and we've heard this a million times, my dad bought 4 properties, so I think property is the way for me. You can see that direct connection between, they were influenced by one of those spheres of influence. And as a result, they're making a financial decision in an entirely different time with an entirely different set of circumstances, but the same decision that may have been made 40 years ago by their parents. Or how many times do you hear, well, my friend invests on Revolut, so
I'll just do that.
That's the way I'm going to do it. We can clearly see where influences come from. And if we think about that, there is now a huge element of, rogue advice, Instagram, influencers. Like, in the UK, only last week, some high-profile influencers were fined by the FCA over there because they were using their influencing profiles to promote like financial products in Dubai or something, and it's like, oh, invest in this and, make your million by the time you're 30. And I mean, it's like, hang on, you can't, how are people digesting financial information? And it became obvious that there was a need not only for like quality education and guidance, but also targeted. So, we can't diminish the stress level of a 22-year-old in work when compared against a 55-year-old or 40-type. Stress is equal, well-being is equal. So how can we then try and inform all of the segments within a workplace of the various principles that are relevant to them at the time? And that's ultimately what employee financial wellness does today.
Incredible. And it's extremely difficult, especially in a workplace, because generally you can have this, I suppose, this broad brush. Here's tons of financial information and you can download all this helpful information that's on our internal comm systems. But what you're saying is actually the same way you would deal with any individual around any aspect, financial is no different. Depending on the life stage you're at, depending on your set of circumstances, your financial plan has to be specific to you in order for it to have any real impact.
Yeah, and there's a couple of stages to this, and it's important to probably recognize this, that education is what a group of people could do, okay? What advice is what an individual should do. So if we think about what's broadly available from a knowledge perspective, our role is to take all of the information in the world, Ireland, investment markets, what is a mortgage, how does a payslip work, like what are the impacts of a budget, right? Take that macro information, that kind of wide-ranging information, and put it into a digestible form to allow employees understand what they could do.
Yes.
Right? So this is education. So that's group form education. Guidance then follows, because what guidance does is it's utterly useless just to teach people and they go, oh, right, now I'm actually more worried, Nick, because now I know what I could have done. So it's utterly useless on its own, right? So hence it's really important then we then give people individual guidance to say, well, actually now you get, 20 minutes or half an hour with a guidance coach, and say, well, look, let's just have a quick look at your principles. Here's what you could do, and signpost those people then to the thing that they actually need to do.
Yes.
Right. And that thing could be, okay, well, now that I've had a quick chat with you, it's pretty obvious that, you need to talk to Mabs. You need to have a conversation with your partner at home because, you're fighting about your money values. Your husband wants to clearly spend all his money on, tech, and you want to save it for your kids' education. You want to live your life today. He wants to live his life in 25 years when they're retired. So maybe that's a conversation at home. Maybe you need to just, now you understand pensions because we taught you. Here's how you get at it. You have a workplace scheme. So here's the access point for it. So really what we want to be able to do is teach people. They could do in groups, in an individual setting, then signpost them to the thing they need to do. And that may include financial advice then. And financial advice is different because financial advice then tells people, okay, you're now in a regulated space. This is regulated by the Senate. So there's rules, there's scrutiny, there's no influencers telling you what you should do. Don't go, investing in sand in Saudi Arabia. It's regulated, right? So it means it needs to be qualified. It needs to be supervised, compliant, and so on. And what advice will then do is it'll say, actually, I need to be able to tell you what you should do with your income and savings to connect to the future events that you aspire to have money to pay for. And that's ultimately where those stresses relieve. It's the doing bit rather than the knowledge. And we've got to a place, thankfully, today where we can connect all of that. And that's ultimately where those stresses are relieved from.
And that model that you've articulated there so well, in 2017, that was the year when Employee Financial Wellness was born, was it?
Yeah.
Yep. When you had that model, were you looking at the market at the time in terms of the workplace and thinking, that's not here. There's nobody is offering what you've effectively come up with. So, that's one piece of the puzzle, right? I've got something that's different. Mm-hmm. But then the second piece is, how do I actually get people to pay attention to it and see the value in it if nobody else is doing it? So can you tell us a little bit about what that period of time was like for you as a business owner and founder?
Yeah, tricky, because certainly if we look at the development of well-being as a concept, ultimately I thought, you know what, this sits under a mental health pillar. This is connected. We understand that the body reacts to stress in the same way, regardless of whether you're being chased by the tiger, spilled red wine on a lovely, nice white couch, or we have this oh my god moment, and money is no different. So what we want to be able to do is be able to try and impress on organizations that this was important. And in the first instance, there was an awful lot of, listen, we pay them, and they have a pension scheme, and we do death and service and stuff. It's not like we can do no more. But I suppose that's changed somewhat. If we look back a couple of decades, the best job that you possibly could have, I'm talking, 70s and 80s here, was typically a public sector job. Yeah. And if we think about why that was because it gave security of tenure, typically, and it gave a guarantee of income for life, forecasted income. You know where you're going to go in increments, and you get this, what was considered to be a gold-plated pension at the end of it. So it came with financial security. But as foreign direct investment, as companies and enterprises arrived in Ireland, that changed somewhat. And we probably all remember American techs having a slide from the second floor to the first floor, and and this was well-being and free food, But quite quickly, I suppose, when we were promoting financial education and well-being as a principle of well-being, some clients still today, really bought into this and said, well, actually, we get it. And it's not just, we don't just want the pension provider or the death and service or the health insurance provider to be because ultimately they have a product.
Yeah.
Who's agnostic to those things? Where's the education gap? And when we were able to demonstrate that people were worried about money, and even with those supports in place, they were still worried about money because it was almost the unsaid. In Ireland we don't talk about money, and we certainly don't go to our employer to say, hey, listen, I'm really worried about it. So as a result, those early days, were tricky, but some clients took us on, and thankfully it's gone from strength to strength there, where we were able to then prove the effect through measurement. And this is probably in the health promotion world. We need to be able to understand the business case. What's the level of financial literacy before and after an intervention? What are the themes within different age segments that employees really need help with? And can we target them with bursts of education like any intervention, and try and support them, and then measure on the back end to see if it's worked? And then we get qualitative and quantitative data on the back and say, well, look, this is what they're saying, this is the improvement. And thankfully it's become it's probably for 7-8 years ago, certainly mental health, physical health were established pillars within the world of employee benefits. I now believe financial well-being as a pillar is becoming more ever present in workplace.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And at that time, you said the word tricky. You said it once or twice there. In terms of how you managed yourself at that time, talk to me a little bit about how you were able to. You obviously believed in the product, but how did you remain maybe optimistic at the start when times were a little tougher? Maybe clients, the doors weren't opening as quick as maybe you would have liked. How did you manage yourself during that period?
Well, certainly when you're building a business, you need to have a level of resilience. You need to have your go-to thing that you just kind of switch off. And ultimately, it was like any other job. You go in every day and say, well, actually, we believe in what we're doing. We're fee-based. We're not just, here, come on in, and we're not doing stuff for free. We believe in value. We believe that we offer value, and it means that we don't want to undersell ourselves for when really we think that there's a huge value add to the organizations that we work with. So in terms of how I would have managed that time personally, I mean,
is that tough to do at the start, Nick, by the way? Sorry, you touched on, you said not underselling yourself at the start of your business. Talk to me about that. Like, maybe you've got some clients who are, squeezing you.
Yeah.
But you know what the value is. Yeah. Were you willing at that time to turn down that business to, I suppose, protect the reputation and the value that you saw in the product?
Honestly, no. We at the time we were trying to find. I remember classically, I put together a proposal for an organization. I mean, geez, I laugh when I look back. I mean, I looked at the hours that we could work with them, the effect. I think I priced it at 140,000 euros for an intervention. And as you and me well know, I mean, well-being budgets aren't 140,000 euros for any organisation in Ireland. Typically, well, we've got 4, or we've got 6, and that's to cover all the pillars. I was like, okay, right, I may have overshot the runway somewhat. So probably went too far one direction, but then quite quickly realised we had to change our models. So it wasn't about the number of hours that perhaps our guidance coaches would be working with each individual team. We kind of unitized it back to saying, well, okay, well, why don't we run intervention in groups, and maybe we'll do 4 sessions a year or 8 sessions a year. We'll support it with guidance. And then we naturally found our price point. But absolutely, was there pushback? Yes. And I suppose in the early days of any business, you do have to find where the market is, and so we would have then found our price point, where we looked at our model and thought, well, actually, we charge per unit of delivery rather than the amount of times an employee might use us. So it changed our model entirely, and we had to change because if we believe in it, but nobody's buying it, then we don't have the opportunity to.
Social proof isn't there yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Proof of concept.
I think that's a great point as well. And that's why I just wanted to kind of press on that a little bit more with you, because I think a lot of founders, there is, and again, maybe this is driven a little bit by social media. We were obviously touching a little bit on that, but that idea of, know your value and don't compromise. And, we see a lot of those messages on social media, but I think the reality for any new business, any founder, is that, like you said there, you've got to kind of meet the market where it is to gain that proof of concept, that social proof. And then you build up, going back to the model that you spoke about earlier on, the idea of know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
There is an element of that when you start a business, especially if you're a little bit ahead of the market.
Yeah, I totally. And I suppose there is a base. We do need to go, okay, well,
what do we need to get?
Yeah, we still need to feed ourselves. We still need to pay the salaries of the people who are working with us. So, it's tricky. You got to try and find where that point is, but ultimately to value price, to be able to say, well, it's not just our costs plus 10 or 15% margin. It's actually, well, what is the value that our buyers are getting for this? And I mean, while we do a podcast, you might say, well, the cost is X. So, if I was to produce a podcast for an employer, it's X plus 15%. Well, you know what? We're mass distributing education here, and that education in those hands of those employees can help them relieve stress, can improve their lives, their financial worlds, and can have a significant effect. So I'm not saying that we need to charge tens of thousands of euros for a podcast, but it's just to find that point at where we believe in the value that we're offering, and finding a price point that is digestible to the market.
Yeah, and I think we're getting, and when you're speaking there, I'm thinking about us as well, and in Fifth Vision and what we do. We're getting a lot better at being able to identify the real outcomes of well-being programs, whether it's financial, physical, mental, emotional. We're able to attach it back to aspects like work engagement. There's incredible models now where we can link them in. Aspects like attrition rates, absenteeism rates. And that's where the real value, because when we look at the workplace, obviously the two biggest work-related illnesses are, stress, anxiety, and depression being one, and then obviously musculoskeletal disorders being another. So if they're the two biggest things that are going to impact our workforce, well, then surely by implementing aspects that are going to reduce people's stress, anxiety, and potential depression, you're going to have individuals not just performing better, but they're going to be happier. They're going to be more likely to want to stay with the organization as well. And I think in the last number of years, we've gotten a lot better at being able to identify and link those metrics back to aspects of what you're talking about in terms of what you offer from the financial well-being side.
Yeah, and I agree, but I don't think we're there yet. And the reason I say that is because, yes, we can do that, as providers and we can make a business case. However, we did a bit of research that we only released last week, actually, which measured 250 HR leaders, C-suite, 150 employees plus in Ireland. And one of the things that struck me, and I didn't think it was the case, but one of the things that really struck me was that there seemed to be quite a disconnect from board level to our world, and HR managers and leaders, by their very nature are people. They're caring. However, some of the numbers were kind of startling in that 70% of HR leaders suggested that the managers, the bosses in workplaces would stop or be reluctant to let employees attend well-being sessions. That work comes first, well-being comes second. And there was some stark kind of findings in there. I'll share them with you. Some stark that there was, maybe that's the case everywhere, but 70% of those people that we measured said this can be a challenge. So there tends to be two main reasons that employers will engage with well-being activities. They want to be employers of choice, right? We're in a country now where we're at full employment. There's an awful lot of movement of employees, and how do we keep them? And the only way we keep them is if we match the benefits that exist elsewhere. And if we think about why people choose an employment, well, they choose it for growth, for culture, and ultimately to realize on their life dreams, aspirations. And if we think about that, well, yeah, we need to be able to empower them to make good decisions with the income they earn. And with that cohort of a workforce that are struggling with mental health, that are struggling with musculoskeletal challenges, those supports need to be in place. Otherwise, what's happening is we're too disconnected from those real things. And what does the future of work look like then? I mean, if an employer chooses to, chooses to deem those aspects of working life to be less important than share price and productivity and all of those things, well, then ultimately, I feel the movement, certainly it's been proven that the movement from a workforce perspective is towards those organizations that support them better.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more on that. And I think, ultimately there's, especially with the next generation, I think coming in, we talk about that quite a lot, but the next generation coming into the workforce, obviously now, they are very adamant that they will only work for people who do, not just focus on, as you were talking about, share price, productivity, but that there are, it's the questions, we hear it a lot now as well, I'm sure you do. A lot of the questions that are asked now are ultimately, what are the benefits that are in place here for me? Have you got a gym? Have you got financial advice on offer, etc.? So organizations, I suppose, now are not going to get away with just focusing on the bottom line anymore. But also there's an understanding of how those benefits, if we, for want of better words, contribute to that bottom line. Yeah.
And there's a couple of parts. I mean, ask not what you can do. It's certainly my wife worked in one of the big four for years, and it was in graduate recruitment, and it just changed. It was like, so what are you guys going to do for me? The candidate was interviewing, the company, and it was like, I'm only available Monday to Thursday, and I'd certainly like to work in this country probably during the summer. This was like, I think we're meant to be interviewing you. so there's been a sea change here, right? Look, the next generation is it's only 10 years away from middle career. It's only 20 years away from kind of into the so the workplace is changing. It's obvious. We look back at Ireland 20 years ago and compare it to now. I mean, what's it going to look like in the future? So, obviously, COVID had a game-changing effect in terms of what working looked like. But one of the things, and I'll stop rabbiting on in a second. I know you have another question, but one of the things that came through from some of the research we did last week was that actually HR leaders were struggling to figure out how to prioritize or identify employee needs. Their role has changed significantly, and a huge percentage had said, it just keeps changing and our priorities change. So how can we fit all of these things in? And you've probably seen it in terms of saying, well, we just want somebody who'll just do it. We don't we get it, but we need you to come in and run it.
Yeah.
So be the outsourced extension of HR.
The vendor for everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not just, now we've added, 10% to the workload of HR. That can't happen because HR is
Maxed.
Loaded. So, certainly our model and I know yours is about taking that workload in its entirety, event management, scheduling, all of that stuff, and make sure that, you're outsourced and supportive and ultimately working towards that end goal of financial literacy in our case.
Yeah, I think the strategic partnerships, as we like to call them, the collaboration is so important now for companies like my own and yours and anybody else who's listening to this podcast, who's in the workplace wellbeing space. Do feel free to reach out as well if you're doing something that's a little bit different to what myself and Nick do, because there's great opportunities, as you say, because organizations are looking for companies who can bolt on additional services to help those well-being needs in the broad aspect. I cut you off there, Nick, when you were about to tell me how you managed, I suppose, those early years of the business. I know that you're a keen runner, but also I know that you did a master's in workplace well-being also.
Correct. Yeah,
From already chatting to you for this last hour, you've brought stress up. It seems like your knowledge on stress as well is quite good. So bring all that together for me a little bit in terms of looking at it from your own lens and running a business.
Yes. So, I mean, really we knew we had a bloody good idea. And we knew this was where the market was moving in terms of our business, but I was fascinated by the science of health, and I was fascinated by God. I just love detail. I love that kind of evidence base. How are decisions made? So I went back to do the postgrad in health promotion, and you know what? It was really, really informative for anyone who's done it. It gives the principles. I mean, there are tens of thousands of cases of health promotion interventions. I mean, for example, Micheál Martin's smoking ban of 2004. I mean, okay, we need to get a healthier country. So how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to change policy, and we're going to change where people can smoke cigarettes because cigarettes are bad for you. So how do we do it? Well, let's run an intervention that's law changing in terms of access and packaging and all that. So that's an intervention. And, I knew that we needed to improve the health because we saw evidently the people coming through the door who were struggling with their mental health, with guilt, with all of the associated negative, and they're just the negative ones, by the way. There's also an opportunity cost for people who are fine and they simply can't know what they don't know, and as a result, they're actually missing out on opportunities, and so there's an opportunity piece. There's a positive side to that, not just the negative side. But what I wanted to be able to do was kind of use learnings from health promotion to be able to understand what successful health promotion looked like in a workplace setting. So it was brilliant because, I mean, what it did was it allowed me to try and understand the various pillars within a successful health intervention. And certainly speaking just from our perspective, I mean, it kind of changed the way we work, because certainly what we used to do was purely educational intervention, but a successful intervention needs to be measured. So there needs to be a deep understanding that organization X may have very different financial pain points compared to organization Y. And how do we know that? Do we just roll out the same thing for all organizations, or do we try and build specific content that will support each organization depending on what the pain points within that organization are? So that understanding piece, not only, it's kind of like a control group. How do we know we're going to reduce stress in early career, mid-career, late career? And we know that in general there's a mass absence of financial literacy. So let's see if we can improve the literacy levels, but we need to understand that. So we need to measure at the start, we need to measure as we go, we need to measure as we. So that sciencey piece of being able to try and understand our individual workforces then informs the intervention type. Yes. Secondly, then education as an intervention. I mean, group settings, individual, media campaigns, whatever the intervention type is, whether it be masterclass, group specific, is it financial well-being for women, is it for retirees, and that's segmented, targeted stuff. But ultimately, the support we believe is the one that will help people is educational. And then finally, what health promotion taught me was that all of that is utterly useless if nobody shows up. It's like building a gym, and if there's nobody comes down to it and no one comes to it, it's utterly useless. And as a result, what health promotion taught me was that communication strategy within a workplace is fundamental to its success. So we would certainly have adopted a kind of a more fun approach, outcome based. So we want to teach people, what the outcome of engaging is. So, we'd often talk principally about like be mortgage free by 53, arriving at a future event where and people can connect to that. They'll be like, oh yeah, well, I'd love to be. I don't think it's possible, but I'd love to be. And as a result, they might engage. I mean, health promotion is ultimately, from a communications perspective, is like a mini marketing campaign. You have an audience, you have a message. Now, how do we try and engage the workforce? And it's scratch the surface. It's engagement. How do we build engagement? And certainly we've been quite successful there. And that financial wellbeing interventions are really popular because everyone gets paid. Yeah. And everyone's going like, they're either worried about money and they're going, oh, I need a bit, or they're like, yeah, I kind of know what I'm doing, but I wouldn't mind popping along. And then ultimately I didn't know that. That's really useful. And they can then use that. So health promotion has been really useful. And look, I love that. I love that stuff around mental health. Certainly the running piece for me is probably my little balancing act
Yeah.
where when you're busy at work, then it's nice to be able to take exercise and get the physical benefits mentally, physically from exercise. And I suppose that helps me personally then in terms of my own work day.
Yeah, and what's really shining through as you're speaking there, Nick, is how you have continuously evolved the business based on you being the tip of the spear, if you like. You're continuously re-educating yourself, seeing where the market's moving, seeing how you can add more value. And I think that's a really nice message for anybody listening in, is that piece probably never stops for a business owner, founder.
Mm-hmm.
And bring me right up to, I suppose, more recent times. The business went through an acquisition with Wealth at Work. Talk to me about, I suppose, 11, 12 years really since 2011.
Yeah.
A lot of hard work, and then this opportunity presents. How did you feel when that came? I suppose it didn't just land on your doorstep. It was a lot of hard work.
Kind of did. Well, the hard work bit obviously didn't land on my doorstep, but Wealth at Work kind of did. I mean, it's kind of funny. Just as we chat, I mean, that kind of education message, it was kind of missing in my life early, as we chatted earlier, like not being great in college and then actually adding the education as you kind of progress through your career. It's probably a good message on the day that's in it, that, the opportunity to educate is ever present. And certainly then, our own business is about education. It's about trying to educate the masses. And it's funny how it's kind of come full circle now that you mention it. But yeah, I mean, the Wealth at Work piece and the acquisition was really quite an exciting time for us, because again, I was building a business and growing a business and, going well, and we were finding our sweet spot, and we kind of nailed our pricing and getting some really good global clients and public sector clients. And, we kind of, through COVID, we kind of got this LinkedIn message, which invariably you'd ignore, right? I mean, oh yeah, I'd love a chat. And you're like, yeah, look, we're doing our thing. Another week later, come here, we'd love a chat, So I had a chat with one of the guys over in Liverpool, headquartered in Liverpool, and Wealth at Work are, the biggest provider of financial education, guidance and advice in the UK, and huge number of public sector clients running retirement courses, private sector education interventions, now over 400 employees, big operation. And again, in the sweet spot of what we do, not just investment management, not just, a product provider, like education, like workplace education. So the guys had said that they had a client. In fact, they had lost a tender because they couldn't operate in Ireland, right? Because the globalization of benefits, I mean, we come up against this all the time, where employers are saying, well, I've got 1,000 people in Ireland and I've got 3,000 people in the UK, or we've got 2,000 in Ireland and 400 in London, and we need to offer the same benefits. We can't just, we can't show preference to these ones over these ones. So, the guys came to me and said, well, look, we have a client who has 4,000 employees in London and about 1,000 employees in Ireland, and we need to be able to deliver your services to them in Ireland for us to get to continue our working relationship with them in the UK. And I was like, okay, well, look, great. Let's subcontract in. We'll do our thing. And we did really well. I mean, they just, the feedback they got was like, oh, they're really good. Love the way they do it. Kind of folksy, fun, a little bit different to the Wealth at Work model. So we're in the middle of COVID, and we were working on this contract for 6 or 9 months, and it was all fine. And then I got an email just say, oh, listen, we're going to be in Dublin. I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And oh yeah, so it's just David, CEO, is going to be in Dublin. He loves Dublin, so it'd be great to have a chat if you want to book a room, whatever. And it was only the day before I thought, this is a bit weird. What's like, what? Like, this is a bit like, what's going on here? I'm blind, really. I mean, so myself and David and some of the guys took a room for the day, and we kind of went through what we're doing, our concepts, our ideas. They went through what they do in the UK, and ultimately that ended up, with the guys saying, look, we want to operate in Ireland. We could do it 2 ways, really. I mean, we could start ourselves, but why would we? You guys you're like us 10, 12 years ago. Yeah. And, we see an awful lot of ourselves and you guys. We're just 12, 15 years further down the road. So, their belief was that they could help support us to try and take advantage of what we think is a new market in Ireland, and one where there is significant opportunity to grow and be the market leader in financial education. So that took me by surprise. And do you know what? It took about a year, obviously regulated, lawyers. At one point I was like, do we need lawyers for this? But you need lawyers. So yeah, I mean, we obviously went through a couple of months there of getting to know each other's business, seeing if we were a good fit personally, professionally, and you know what? As time has progressed, we couldn't get better bedfellows, for want of a better word. The guys in Liverpool are so supportive. They're great. And really, what that's done is it's allowed us to grow, to hire more people, experts. Really, only up until a couple of years ago, me, Kieran, Mark, we were doing all aspects, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's what it's like.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the ordering of the stationery, you're presenting the sessions, you're the corporate salesperson, you're the financial advisor, you're the administrator. Where it allowed us to say, well, actually, if we want to get bigger, we need a marketing person, we need a full-time educator, we need more than so somebody's dedicated to being amazing at presenting, somebody who's amazing at then giving guidance, and so we've now been able to grow the team, and that's thanks to being part of a bigger group that we see, from a business perspective, we see we see the next 5 or 10 years being that financial well-being will be ever present in workplaces around the country. And look, I'd like to think we are an evidence-based organisation that allows us to build bespoke sessions that specifically support the clients we have.
And that can be quite nice, the way you described it, where you're doing a little bit of everything, but
Yeah.
there does become, it does get to a stage where when you're established and you've got the clients, you think, right now, if I want to really leverage this, I need to have a team in place that specializes in all those core aspects. How has it changed your mindset as a founder?
Well, it's changed dramatically, actually, because I mean, it's quite exciting because now we have the ability to be even braver than we were before. It means that we can really try and grow. I mean, the model is now grow. It's not just build a little comfortable business that makes a little bit of profit. It's let's see if we can take advantage of what we believe is a new market. We need to continue to then develop services. I mean, our digital services. I mean, ultimately we are humans supported by digital, so we need to be able to address the needs of our workforces that we support, and that means that we have retail, we have airport staff, we have it's not just people behind laptops, and that means that how do we get our message to those people? How do we help those people? So it means that we need to have, we need to be human-led, because money is still very human. Digital doesn't work, on its own for human, or for workplace interventions around money, because
People want to speak to people. Yeah,
they really do, but at the same time, all of those services need to be supported by digital to deliver scale.
Yes,
and so it allows us then to take all of the might of the UK in terms of what's already been developed, and the technology that has already been developed, that we can just bring it to Ireland and say, well, actually, we don't have to drive the same road in terms of getting there. The guys are 15 years ahead in terms of their development, so we can take an awful lot of the learnings and the tech and just bring it over to Ireland to allow us to support our business. So it means it's really quite exciting, and that my job has changed now from the ordering and the marketing and the financial advice and the presentations to almost like the goal is growth, and it's like having a jigsaw, and the jigsaw is a certain size, and as soon as you complete the jigsaw, it just seems to get bigger, and you're like, right, so there's more pieces needed now, and you go, okay, I need more pieces, but it's never finished, it's like, okay, every time I think I finished this thing and it's looking good, then we just need to add a little bit more, and that's I love it. I think it's great. I think it's exciting. I think it's my brain is kind of that way. It's just kind of trying to problem solve now rather than and do, and that's cool because it means there's still a little bit of doing in there, but the doing bit is now about, well, let's try and see if I can help the various teams that we have in place now to take a growth approach, see if we can tweak things to get a little bit better at what we do, the content we design, the support we give, the trends, and so on. So it's
it sounds like there's a second episode here, Nick, where we can talk about how big that jigsaw is getting.
How big is the jigsaw?
And we can also talk about running. We didn't get to touch on that today.
Okay.
I know you've got a marathon coming up. I did my first marathon this past weekend, and I thought my time was really good, 3:26. And then I spoke to you, and you were down in the 2:40s.
The 2:40s, yeah. So we'll see if we can shave. I mean, when you're like, going from 3:26 to 3:20, that's it's a big jump. But I mean, like, a big jump at 2:46 to go to 2:45 is actually like a big jump. But no, I'm delighted to hear you had a good day on Sunday, I think.
I'll be asking you for some advice for the next one, Nick. But one final question, if you don't mind. I'm conscious of our time.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed our episode. We always finish the podcast like this. One lesson to maybe leave our listeners with. So if you think about your life as a business owner, founder, if there was one lesson that you would leave our listeners with, what would it be?
So from a business perspective, I mean, there's always tomorrow. No matter how much of a struggle you find things in the early days, just stick to your plan, but believe in your business, believe in your concepts, be flexible in terms of pricing, in terms of just seeing where the market is, but to continually add not only education but experience, because when you put those two things together, it means, well, that the door will eventually open, and growth doesn't tend to happen overnight, so it's a marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and as a result, step by step, and to use some of the running analogies. I mean, you don't get to run a fast marathon or any marathon without various steps on the training along the way. And look, we could probably equate that to business. I mean, you start with a 5K, then you get to a 10K, then you get to 15, 20, and 25, and so on. And look, business is no different. It's not going to happen overnight, and just lending that bit of knowledge about how to do it right, combine that with effort and success, I hope, for everyone listening, is not too far away.
Nick Lawlor, Employee Financial Wellness, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Mark.